In 1999, Lara was already digging through the code of her fourth game, and core design worked virtually non-stop to make this happen. Tomb Raider was the only PlayStation franchise outside of annual sports games that was on its fourth major installment on Sony's platform that year. Most action games like it wouldn't see their Chapter 4 until the next century, and the next PlayStation. Tomb Raider 4: The Last Revelation launched on November 22nd for the PS1. With PlayStation exclusivity ending the following year, it also appeared on the Sega Dreamcast the following March. For the second time, Lara's voice was recast. Moving forward, she was portrayed by Jonelle Elliott, who would stay on for the next 3 games and later continue her career in television animation.
Tell me now, or you've just run out of time.
After posing for Playboy, Nell McAndrew was swapped for a real-life Lara, Lara Weller. Lara's digital physique was pumped up with more polygons, and her mouth now moved when she spoke, replacing the head bobbing that passed for speaking before. The composer was also new, as Peter Connolly came on board to replace Nathan McCree for the next 2 Tomb Raider games.
The pace is quickening now, yeah? One more crossing, child. Or do you wish to stop for tea?
The story began in 1984 when Lara was a teenager. In the first level, she joined her mentor, Werner von Croy, in exploring the Temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia for a relic called the Iris. Von Croy seized the Iris but was enclosed within its resting place, and Lara barely escaped the temple alive. In present-day 1999, she mistakenly removed the Amulet of Horus from an Egyptian tomb. This brought back the tomb's owner, Set, who could only be returned to his prison during the millennial constellation, when the deity Horus could be summoned. Lara equipped herself with a new crossbow and revolver while touring Egypt's hotspots. She got behind the wheel of a Jeep, and finally a motorbike, after riding one in several of the earlier game cinemas. Her methods of exploring expanded to climbing poles, swinging on ropes, and shimmying around corners that stopped her in the past. The item menu switched from a ring-shaped view to a linear list, and certain items could be combined like the other predominant action puzzler, Resident Evil. Last Revelation reverted back to a straightforward storyline, with Lara's track as a young woman filling in for Croft Manor's training grounds. Except for this tutorial in Cambodia, the game took place in Egypt, among popular archaeological attractions like King's Valley and Alexandria. Lara discovered Von Croy had been possessed by Set, and after confronting the two of them in Cairo, she set off for the Great Pyramid of Giza. She sealed the mighty Set away, and met a supposedly clear-headed Von Croy during her escape. As the collapsing pyramid caught up, Lara rejected Von Croy's efforts to save her and disappeared in the dust. The ending left fans in the dark, and the future of the series seemed uncertain. The reviews for Last Revelation were lower than those of its innovative predecessors, but sales continued to impress. It was a bestseller in the UK for 2 months, and closed with around 5 million in sales overall. Those who played it on the PC were treated to a level editor, the first time any development tools have been added to a Tomb Raider game. This inspired UK publication The Times, who had earlier funded real-life expeditions that led to the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, to join with Eidos in creating a single level based on the remarkable finding. To the developers, Lara was rotting in a sarcophagus somewhere and could stay there if it meant their nightmarish deadlines were over. But Lara Croft would prove far too resilient for that. Lara Weller bowed out of series promotion, welcoming the 5th Lara model, Lucy Clarkson, who accepted the role at age 17, and the production wheel at Core and Eidos continued its grind. Tomb Raider Chronicles arrived in stores in November of 2000. Lara continued to be playable thanks to the combined memories of Winston Smith, Lara's butler, Father Bram Patrick Dunstan, the Croft family priest, and Charles Kane, Lara's former history teacher. The three gathered inside Lara's home after her memorial and reminisced about some of her greatest exploits. The first followed her through Rome, chasing rivals Pierre Dupont and Larson Conway from Tomb Raider 1 to the Philosopher's Stone, known to US Harry Potter fans as the Sorcerer's Stone. The second pitted her against Russian mafioso Sergei Mikhailov in search of the Spear of Destiny near the ocean's floor. The third traveled back to her childhood when strange rumors tempted her to search out the haunted Black Isle of Ireland. The fourth and final section saw Lara retrieving the iris she originally lost from Werner von Croy from one of his industrial complexes in New York City. Chronicles featured the least amount of enhancements when compared to the prior three sequels. Lara could saunter across a tightrope, roll out of crawl spaces, and sneak up on enemies with a stealth attack. And the MP5 submachine gun was upgraded to an HK model named after the manufacturer. Lara's house was again omitted, and she instead trained in the backstage area of an opera house in Rome. She slipped on a black catsuit to be sexy and stealthy in New York, and donned full-body camouflage to brave the chill of the Barents Sea. Chronicles had the lowest cumulative review scores and sales of any game in the Tomb Raider series so far, but it was still an incredibly popular game, selling over 1.5 million copies. Lara's harshest critiques likened the fifth Tomb Raider game to games released 5 years earlier, and said playing it was like going back in time. The series had survived for half a decade using the same game engine, and all parties involved agreed it was time to technically start over from scratch. Lara was in for some interesting developments, but would not return to consoles until 2003. The series next surfaced in the least likely of locations, the Game Boy Color. The system had been upgraded from the monochrome original in 1998 and now had enough definition to accommodate the curvaceous explorer. Her first portable journey was simply called Tomb Raider and featured her side-scrolling through 5 areas and 14 levels in search of the Nightmare Stone, a gem with the power to revive the evil god Quaxit. It was released in June of 2000, 4 months before Tomb Raider Chronicles. Lara stood 48 pixels tall on the Game Boy Color. Save crystals marked progress thanks to a battery backup, and Lara could perform an astonishing 25 different moves. Lara only packed twin pistols, ditching the rest of her usual arsenal, but the experience was still surprisingly innovative and polished. Lara returned to the Game Boy Color a year later in Curse of the Sword. After Lara was cut by an antique blade, she was marked as the vessel for the return of a wicked magician named Madame Pivot, forcing Lara to find and destroy the cursed weapon. Keeping the gameplay similar to the first Game Boy Tomb Raider, Curse of the Sword covered 7 different areas, and each environment expanded in scope and detail. It reviewed as high, if not higher, than the game that came before it. The year that Lara was cursed by the sword, Nintendo launched the Game Boy Advance, and Lara was quick to notice. She went portable a third time on the new system in 2002, and IDOS, along with developer Ubisoft, attempted to shift her perspective. Instead of scrolling side to side, Tomb Raider: The Prophecy viewed its action from an isometric angle. On this particular adventure, Lara sought the tomb of Ezekiel, a 6th century BC priest and prophet. Reviewers were not smitten by this new way to play, despite it being slightly more reminiscent of classic Tomb Raider. Citing the top-down approach led to stretches of unsatisfying repetition. Prophecy to this day is Lara's last adventure that remains exclusive to a handheld platform. Exciting and fresh as these portable experiences were, they were not the biggest headlines to hit the franchise in the new millennium. Since 1998, IDOS and Paramount Pictures had been knocking around the idea of a Tomb Raider feature film. Brent Friedman, who co-wrote Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and Steven D'Souza, who wrote and directed Street Fighter, both threw their screenplays into the ring, but the final draft was penned by the movie's director, Simon West, and 4 other writers. In the title role, Paramount considered Demi Moore, Pamela Anderson, Jerry Ryan, Carla Pavonsky, and porn star Lindsay Dawn McKenzie, but the part eventually went to 26-year-old Angelina Jolie. Lara Croft Tomb Raider premiered on June 11, 2001. It co-starred Daniel Craig, who would later become James Bond, Ian Glenn, who would later join the Resident Evil film franchise, and Jon Voight, Angelina's real-life father, as Lara's father, Richard, who before then was only mentioned in the first game's instruction manual. The film received horrible reviews and incredible ticket sales. It has an aggregate score of 33 out of 100 and is the most profitable video game movie of all time, with $274 million made worldwide. Fans most appreciated Jolie's physicality in the role, and not just her cup size. Certain moments were clearly inspired by the way Lara moves and shoots in each game. With Tomb Raider at local theaters, the franchise was at its peak in popularity. A sequel, subtitled The Cradle of Life, was planned and released in July of 2003, but after it earned less than half of the first film's take, and Jolie expressed zero interest in returning, a third was never developed. During the production of the first movie, a new Lara model was hired by IDOS, Jill DeJong. Several theme park attractions were built to promote the film series, including a flying roller coaster in Ontario and 3 giant top spins in Ohio, Virginia, and Laziz, Italy. They were revamped when Paramount Parks sold several of their properties to Cedar Fair in 2007. Lara's 6th console Tomb Raider was released in the summer of 2003 as well. It had been in development since the turn of the century and was originally supposed to come out in its usual November time slot the previous year. It launched on the PC and PlayStation 2. Lead programmer Richard Morton cited several problems with anticipating the PS2's performance, and these issues, along with sharing in the notoriety of the second movie, pushed the launch back a few months. It was clearly the most ambitious entry thus far. Tomb Raider: The Angel of Darkness also appeared in July of 2003. Early impressions suggested it was a much more grown-up game than any of the first 5. Lara now had dialogue options in certain conversations that sometimes affected how her adventure would play out. Ever resourceful, she was on the run from the authorities after her mentor, Von Croy, was murdered by a serial killer known as the Monstrum. Lara was blamed for the crime and evaded the police, along with a mysterious stranger, as she dug for answers. Von Croy's work tied him to a collection of 5 Obscura paintings that could revive a cubiculum Nephili, also known as an Angel of Darkness.
Damn it! I'm sick of your Parisian low-life ways. I need results.
Careful, Vixen. You don't need things to get any worse.
Tomb Raider 6 had 6 areas to explore and 35 individual levels. Lara illuminated the back streets and ghettos of Paris, the basement of the Louvre, and several locations in the city of Prague. For the first time, Lara was forced aside, and players took control of a different character, Curtis Trent. Peter Van Eckhart, the game's central villain, killed Curtis's father, and he joined Miss Croft in stopping Eckhart's plan. The arsenal had a bounty of new weapons, Lara could perform stealth takedowns and hand-to-hand combat moves, and her polygon count jumped from 500 to 5,000. Angel of Darkness told a thrilling story, but the game's real drama came from its flawed controls, bugs, and unnecessary additions. Lara now had an experience system that forced her to level up before she could perform actions she had been doing uninterrupted for 5 years. IDOS rushed the game to meet quarterly financial targets, so important sections got axed, and the controls were not rigorously tested. It sold a decent amount, eventually letting go of 2.5 million copies, but is critically considered the worst game in the series. Some attributed Cradle of Life's poor turnout to the animosity surrounding Lara's latest game. It would be the last Tomb Raider game created by Core Design. The company was sold off in 2006. In the third and final part of our Tomb Raider retrospective, another developer steps in to carry the torch. Lara loses her home, searches the world for the Sword of Swords, and celebrates her 10th anniversary in style.